been quite a while since Triumph has had a touring motorbike on 17-inch wheels, but now here it is, the new Tiger Sport 800. But how does it perform? How does it handle everything from sporty riding to touring? And can it live up to the reputation of its highly popular predecessor, the Tiger Sport 1050? That's what we're covering in this video. Hi everyone and welcome to a new video. I'm reporting to you from the south of Portugal near Faro at the first presentation of the Triumph Tiger Sport 800. And it's an extremely exciting engine, not only because Triumph has had a bit of a gap in their lineup, as I'd say, but also because there's already a kind of cult status surrounding the Tiger Sport 1050. That bike is, I'd say, the direct predecessor, or maybe not directly, since a few years have passed in between, but it's certainly the spiritual predecessor of the new Tiger Sport 800. And yes, this bike has a bit of a cult following. But why is that? The Tiger Sport 1050 was introduced in 2013 with a major update in 2016. Back then, it was a bike that offered a comfortable touring riding position along with some electronic features and comfort upgrades starting with the 2016 model. But at the same time, it had the engine from the Speed Triple, a total beast. Loads of torque and power right from the lower revs, paired with that typical three-cylinder character. Punchy, rev-happy, and just a joy to ride. I think this combination really resonated with a lot of riders. Eventually, its time came to an end, and Triumph didn't really replace it with anything. Now, years later, the Tiger Sport 800 is here to fill that gap and offer the same qualities again. Once again, it's all about finding that balance between sportiness and touring capability. But let's think about it. Nowadays, with strict emissions regulations, is that even possible anymore? Can a modern engine in 2025 excite us as much as the raw power plants of the past? That's exactly what I came here to find out. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's first go over the key technical specs so we're all on the same page. I'll cover those for you off camera. The Triumph Tiger Sport 800 is equipped with a newly developed 789cc three-cylinder engine producing 115 horsepower at 10,750 revolutions per minute and 84 Newton meters of torque at 8,500 revolutions per minute. With this new engine, the obvious question arises, which of Triumph's many three-cylinder engines is it derived from? While it shares the architecture, such as the cylinder angle, engine casing design, and some internal components, with Triumph's 660cc and 765cc three-cylinder engines, it is a completely new development and unique in many respects. Differences compared to the 660cc engine include the pistons, cylinders, crankshaft and valve control system. Additionally, the 800cc engine features 3 throttle bodies instead of the single one found on the 660cc engine. This improves throttle response, but also required adjustments to the chassis, clutch and transmission. The clutch has been made slightly smaller, while the transmission has longer gearing in the first 3 gears compared to the Tiger Sport 660. The bike offers 3 riding modes, Street, Rain and Sport. Each mode adjusts throttle response, traction control and front wheel lift control differently, ranging from cautious to sporty. Traction control and by extension front wheel lift control is not only switchable but can also be individually configured for each riding mode in all 3 parameters. The suspension consists of an adjustable Showa upside down fork with 150 millimeters of travel and adjustable compression and rebound damping up front. At the rear there's a monoshock with 150 millimeters of travel, adjustable preload and rebound damping. The Triumph branded braking system features 310 millimeter dual front discs with radially mounted 4-piston calipers and a 255 millimeter rear disc with a 2-piston floating caliper. Lastly, the dimensions. The seat height is 835 millimeters, the bike's wet weight is 214 kilograms, and the fuel tank holds 18.6 liters. The wheels measure 120/70/17 at the front and 180/55/17 at the rear. And the bike comes standard with Michelin Road 5 Sport Touring tires. Standard equipment includes an LCTFT display, familiar from the 660cc models, with Bluetooth connectivity. Also standard are cruise control and a quick shifter with a blipper function. So now that we've got all the basics covered, let's get straight into the first point of this test ride. The day started, unfortunately, with some fairly wet weather. The ride began near Faro, heading north towards the hills of the Algarve, where some beautiful twisty roads awaited us. But first, you have to get through business before the party begins. That means navigating through the city, some faster sections, and then we'll dive into the ergonomics. Basically, for me, these crossover motorbikes, let's call them that, motorbikes with 17-inch tires, but with features typical of adventure tourers, like a tall front, good wind protection, and an upright seating position, tend to be quite tall. But that's not the case with the Tiger Sport 800. We already mentioned the 835mm seat height, but it's combined with a very slim waist, and those 835mm aren't just at a single point. They extend over a larger seat area. So even when I sit further back like I'm doing now, I'm 1.85 meters tall, I can still comfortably reach the ground. Even riders with shorter legs shouldn't have any trouble here. In my opinion, compared to other touring motorbikes, you sit relatively close to the handlebars. Your arms aren't fully stretched but slightly bent, which gives you excellent control. As we already heard in the technical data, the bike has an extremely short wheelbase. In urban areas, this gives it fantastic agility. In countries where you're allowed, or at least where people do it anyway, you can easily weave through traffic. Then, of course, there's the 3-cylinder engine. It's wonderfully smooth, as you'd expect. At low revs, what impresses me the most is, first of all, the smooth throttle response. There's no harshness. Personally, I tend to avoid first gear on most motorbikes because it's often too short, a bit jerky, and once you pick up some speed, it just feels unnecessary. I usually prefer to shift straight into second as soon as I'm rolling. That's not the case here. You can comfortably stay in first gear up to 50 or 60 kilometers per hour, and it's still effortless to control. Or if you want to ride neighbor-friendly and cruise, you can shift into sixth gear as early as 40 kilometers per hour without any issues. This user-friendly handling and the bike's versatility in how you can operate it are top-notch. But it's not just the engine that's great, it works perfectly with the transmission. As mentioned earlier, the transmission has been slightly adjusted with the first 3 gears now having longer ratios. This makes it incredibly smooth to ride, minimizing the need to shift frequently. On top of that, there's the quick shifter, which performs flawlessly in every situation. Whether you're shifting up or down at the lowest revs, it handles everything with ease. Honestly, riding a motorbike in urban areas couldn't be much more straightforward than this. Eventually, though, we left the urban area behind, thankfully. Then we got a bit of long-distance riding, not really full long-distance riding, though, because the Algarve isn't too far away. And soon enough, the curves began. But there was just enough straight road to get a feel for the touring comfort. And how did I find that? Well, at some point during the ride, when the roads were finally dry for a change, I shared my thoughts with you. Today's program covered just under 250 kilometers, so now we're going to talk about the touring capabilities of the Tiger Sport 800. The first point is the windshield. As with other Triumph models, it's very easy to adjust one-handed even while riding. I think it's a good, straightforward system. As for wind protection, I'd say it's average. In the low position, the wind hits me at about neck height with my 1.85 in the Masen height. In the high position, it's around the mouth and nose area. However, there's a bit of turbulence around the helmet. It could definitely be better. That said, it's not catastrophic. And I have to praise the wind deflectors here, which significantly reduce the pressure on the shoulders. By the way, the Tiger Sport 800 here is equipped with the GT package, which includes handguards, heated grips, and the side cases. The cases have a capacity of 57 liters and are the same as those on the Tiger Sport 660. This means they're compatible. If you already own a Tiger Sport 660, you can simply transfer the cases over. The case system itself is, in my opinion, quite decent. Close, open here, press, and it opens. During today's rain, they definitely proved their waterproofing. Only now, when I opened them here, did a small drop get inside. But overall, the interior is still completely dry, and the space is nicely organized with dividers. So all in all, it's a good practical luggage system. Each of these cases can fit a full-face helmet. Additionally, and this might be surprising considering the minimalist design, there's also a luggage rack, a luggage extension, and a top case. The top case is large enough to fit 2 full-face helmets with a capacity of almost 49 liters. The next point is the fuel tank. According to Triumph, fuel consumption is 4.7 liters per 100 kilometers. However, the way we've been riding here isn't exactly realistic. So today's consumption figure doesn't really mean much. That said, it wasn't particularly high, just over 5 liters, because we couldn't really push hard in this bad weather. With a consumption of about 5 liters per 100 kilometers, the 18.6 liter tank easily offers a range of well over 300 kilometers. Next up, the seat. When you look at it from the side, the shape is a bit deceptive, the cover is very taut, and there's a bit of give where it sinks in. This is a good thing, as the low seat height of 835 millimeters isn't just limited to one low point, it extends over quite a long area. This means that even if you sit further back, because you've got a tank bag, for example, or because your belly demands some respect and space, you'll still have good contact with the ground, even with shorter legs. I can't really tell you whether the seat breaks in over longer tours, because we've had constant photo stops. So the rear end never has to stay in the saddle long enough for the seat to start breaking in or for the comfort to become an issue. As for the comfort of the Showa suspension, I found it absolutely fine. The components handle smaller bumps very well, providing really clean damping. I'm talking about minor uneven surfaces like manhole covers and the like. Those are handled smoothly. When you go over larger bumps though, like speed humps or rougher patches caused by roots under the asphalt, for example, you do feel a more pronounced jolt from the suspension. At that point you notice that this isn't a touring couch or a bike designed entirely for comfort. Instead, there's an element of sportiness built into it. And honestly, as it is now, and it's still adjustable, I think it's in a very good sweet spot. Lastly, it's worth mentioning that we have a daytime running light. Let me just switch it on real quick. There we go. We've got a daytime running light, and the display, which is admittedly a bit controversial, the display has a daylight sensor or light sensor, and when it detects darkness, the low beam switches on automatically. All lighting elements are LED. The final point we were able to test thoroughly today was the splash protection. And yes, the rear is very minimalist and quite short. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this on touring bikes. Sure, there's an optional luggage rack available as an accessory, but I think it completely ruins the bike's lines. It's just this chunky overhang. That said, if you're going to do two-up touring, I feel like you almost need an additional tie-down point back there. But where this is also relevant is in terms of splash protection. Without a doubt, as you can see, we've got another Tiger Sport 800 here next to us without panniers. Only the guides had panniers on their bikes today. You can clearly see a much greater degree of dirt buildup on the bikes without panniers. It's especially visible here on the grab handle. I hope the camera focuses properly. Come on, there we go. You can see a significant amount of dirt buildup here. Meanwhile, with the panniers, you obviously get much less dirt on this area. The dirt stays contained in the lower section, and the pillion seat itself remains relatively clean. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're traveling with a passenger. Not only do you need the panniers for space, but they also work as optimized splash guards. Since I took this footage, some time has passed. The ride back was mostly on motorway-like sections and through some urban areas again. Nothing particularly exciting there. But I was able to focus a bit more on the touring comfort, and a few more things came to mind, or things I was able to look up. For example, something I absolutely have to emphasize: the payload capacity is exceptionally good. Especially when compared to direct Japanese competitors, the 224 kilogram maximum payload is really impressive. You can really pack those spacious side cases and the top case to the brim. So a top plus point in my opinion for the Tiger Sport 800. The second point, the GT package I mentioned, it turns out it hasn't been officially launched or prepared for the German market yet. It's not even available in the configurator. I hope that will change. So I can't give you a price for it right now. In the UK, I've been told that the price is very attractive for this combination of panniers, heated grips and handguards. And finally, I focused again on the comfort in the saddle. This is one of the very few downsides I can point out about the Tiger Sport 800. In the highest windshield position, and on the way back I didn't use earplugs like I did earlier, you do get noticeable turbulence around the head. At my height, it's quite loud. That could definitely be better. However, in the context of the overall package, I don't find it to be a big deal. But of course, otherwise people will say I'm only singing praises. So yes, the wind protection could definitely be improved. All right, enough pragmatism and reasoning. We all know that when a bike has sport in its name, you expect it to deliver on that front too. Which brings me back to my initial question: can a modern engine in 2025 still excite us the way the good old engines used to? Let's hear what I had to say in the saddle. Yes. The search for emotion, I feel like that's something that accompanies us with almost every motorbike. Or rather, every modern motorbike, to be precise. Especially those that had a predecessor from, as some like to call it, the good old days when exhausts were louder and engines often operated with a raw, brute force. Nowadays, it's not so easy for manufacturers. We're all aware of the many regulations. Everything has to be tamer, more refined, better behaved. And accordingly, it's no longer so easy to bring out emotion. Now, back to my initial question, can the Tiger Sport 800 still be as brilliant as its ancestor, the Tiger Sport 1050? Well, let me put it this way, yes it can. Unfortunately, today's weather wasn't ideal for really pushing the engine to its limits. But even under these conditions, I can feel that it wants to go. It wants to give more. If you look at the torque curve, it's flat as a board. From as low as 2500 RPM at just under 70 Newton meters, it holds steady through the entire rev range, from just under 70 to a maximum of 84 Newton meters, and then slightly tapers off again. That means there's plenty of pull, even at lower revs. Of course, it can't quite match the raw punch of the 1050 engine. But today, I particularly appreciated how easy and manageable this modern engine is, especially on the sometimes slippery wet roads we had and with the storm we faced. It's just wonderfully straightforward to handle. Whether you're in road mode or sport mode, it's three-cylinder riding at its finest. The throttle response is silky smooth, yet there's still mid-range punch. You don't have to wring it out, but you can if you want to. It's always predictable and easy to ride. Whether in road mode or sport mode, riding a three-cylinder engine at its finest. The throttle response is silky smooth, yet there's still solid mid-range power. You don't have to rev it hard, but you can if you want to. It remains consistently predictable and therefore easy to ride. I'd say the 1050 is more emotional, but when you consider the overall package of this engine and the superbly functioning quickshifter, which works perfectly at any RPM, whether in town or while cruising through curves, you really have to look at the whole setup. And that in turn makes it both easy to handle and sporty enough to make you think, wow, this bike feels right. I enjoy twisting the throttle on this. I'd gladly travel long distances on it too. So the overall package of the engine has already convinced me. Now let's return to the main segment and talk about what the other components have revealed to me and how much I like them. As you can see, there's definitely enthusiasm here. First and foremost, I think the ease of handling is a huge advantage. Not everyone is a world-class rider, and you don't always want to be pushed to your limits. For example, maybe I should explain why I keep talking about the Tiger Sport 1050. It's not because I was old enough to ride it when it first came out. I wasn't. But last year, I had the opportunity to get my hands on a 2013 model, which didn't even have traction control or any of the fancy electronic features, and take it for a spin. And that bike, it's impressive, absolutely emotional, but at the same time, it's not exactly easy peasy to knock out 300, 400 or 500 kilometers a day on it. You really have to work for it, especially with those first model years without traction control. With the Tiger Sport 800, it's the opposite. You hop on, feel comfortable right away, and just take off. And yet, despite the absolutely dreadful weather in the morning, we got lucky. Believe it or not, the weather changes very quickly here in the Algarve. We even found a few relatively dry patches. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how the Tiger Sport 800 handles at maximum lean angles because, sadly, the roads never fully dried out and the storm kept blowing branches onto the asphalt. So there's still some suspense left for further testing of the Tiger Sport 800 in the upcoming season. Maybe subscribe to the channel while you're at it. Still, the engine impressed me, and so did the rest of the bike. Which brings me back to the topic of praise. All the journalists have said it's hard to find much to criticize here. When you sit on it, as I've already mentioned, the riding position is nicely front-wheel oriented. This means you get comfort from the upright position, but with just a slight forward lean, you can really feel the front wheel. I found the suspension to be excellent, especially as it was set up for my weight of just over 70 kilograms. It feels very progressive. Small bumps are absorbed gently, perfect for touring. But there's an added bonus. When you approach a curve and brake, the front compresses slightly, and then the progressive damping kicks in. This gives you an incredible amount of stability and great feedback. When you encounter grooves or, like today, slippery conditions, you genuinely feel like you've got everything under control. This also applies to the stock tires. So it's both easy to handle and sporty enough to make you think, wow, this bike feels right. I enjoy riding it, twisting the throttle and traveling on it too. The Michelin Road 5, I think it's a great match and gave me a lot of confidence, especially today. It's a tire that works really well in the wet. Speaking of steering behavior, with this tire, it felt like those first few degrees of lean were quite agile, almost a bit tippy. Not in a bad way though. After those initial few degrees, as you tip into the curve, it stabilizes and becomes beautifully neutral and balanced. Then you can lean forward slightly and guide yourself smoothly into the radius with precision. And then there's the silky power delivery of the three-cylinder engine. You blast out of the turn and fire through the gears with the fantastic quick shifter. Even in these wet and lively conditions, It was an absolute joy. The third point, the brakes, also excellent. Sure, there's no big name branding like Brembo Stylema or anything like that, but it clearly doesn't need to be. I honestly have nothing to criticize about the braking performance. Up front, I like how the first few millimeters of lever travel start off soft. The pressure point builds up quickly after that and gets firmer. I was actually able to brake almost exclusively with just one finger, as you don't need much hand strength to apply sharper braking force. I'm also someone who uses the rear brake a lot. It's nicely adjustable, even in today's slippery conditions. If you want to lengthen the bike a bit, stabilize it, or bring more pressure onto the front wheel, you can do so. Or if you want to control your speed through a tight corner by using the rear brake, that works really well too. Honestly, I can't find anything to complain about. I'm sorry. All in all, the bike offers an extremely harmonious package, even on twisty roads. I just wish we'd had better conditions to really push it to the limit. Well, I'll just have to get my hands on another Tiger Sport 800. After today, I definitely want to do that. And with that, we're slowly coming to the end. But there's still something important to mention. A good motorbike is great, but how affordable is it? And this, I think, is where you can really say, hey, if you're considering getting a road touring motorbike, a test ride with the Tiger Sport 800 is an absolute must. The price in Germany is 11,795 euros and in Austria 12,995 euros. That's cheaper than all the other crossover motorbikes in this performance class. For example, I'd consider its direct competitor, based purely on the 3-cylinder engine, to be the Yamaha Tracer 9. In Austria, that bike costs nearly 1,000 euros more at 13,899 euros. In Germany, it's not even available in a direct price comparison because in Germany you can't get a standard Tracer 9 anymore. It starts with the Tracer 9 GT and that's already priced at 16,000 euros. So, wow, this is a price banger in itself. And on top of that, you have 16,000 kilometer service intervals, valve clearance checks every 32,000 kilometers, a 4-year warranty, and at the presentation, there was even a calculation that showed, compared to its competitors, this bike should be cheaper per kilometer. I couldn't verify that myself, but just the other numbers sound really good, really attractive. And quickly about the colors. The yellow option, which is the coolest one in my opinion, costs $100 extra. So yeah, I'm telling you folks, go for a test ride and let's go. At this point, I'm officially out of things to say. Despite the mixed conditions, I'm genuinely thrilled and I hope I managed to convey some of that excitement to you. I also hope I answered all of your questions. If not, drop them in the comments and give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this first impression of the Triumph Tiger Sport 800. Stay tuned for the upcoming tests, as I mentioned before. Thanks for watching and until next time, take care and goodbye.